A single alien caught a falling child. Years later, humanity returned with a battle fleet, not for war but for something far more dangerous. Station Kesh 7 never truly dimmed, but during the quiet shift between midnight cargo runs and the morning personnel transfers, its endless noise softened to a deep rhythmic hum. In one of those rare lulls, a small girl flattened her palms against an observation window and left tiny fog prints on the cold alloy. "Mira, don't smear the glass," her mother said gently. "The cleaning drones will get upset." Mira Vasquez didn't move. Beneath her small brown fingers, the transparent panel revealed a mechanical jungle, cranes swinging like metal trees, cargo pods drifting in guided clouds, the ribbed hulls of docked vessels gleaming like sleeping whales. Far below, in the lower docking ring, she spotted a cluster of beings glowing in soft blues and greens. "Them," Mira whispered. "They're humming again." Her father stepped beside her, glancing at his wrist display out of habit rather than need. "The Ethal like to stay in groups," he said. "Makes them feel safer in our metal world." "Do we make them feel unsafe?" Mira asked. Her father paused. He worked the rough edges of human-alien trade routes, where first meetings still carried tension. "Sometimes," he finally said, "everyone feels uneasy until they learn each other's rhythms." Mira squinted through the glass. "That one has spirals on their arms, like our garden snails." Her mother followed her pointing finger. "Maybe they're an artist." She rested a warm hand on Mira's shoulder. "Come, let's find breakfast. They sell sweets here you've never tasted." Mira didn't move. The Ethal's glow fascinated her more than sugar. They evolved for gentle phosphorescent seas, not harsh station corridors. Their skin pulsed with shifting colors that rippled when they communicated or felt emotion. To a child from a dry frontier world with its brutal yellow sun and sparse red dirt, they looked like living fragments of a stolen night sky. Down below, Kalen issued work orders in the Ethal's melodic tongue, rising and falling chords that carried through the dock's recycled atmosphere. Kalen wasn't formally an artist, but the light patterns on their limbs were intricate. Spirals and woven rings. Marks of a seaside village on Saren that once deeply believed in the moon's pull on the tides. Kalen still believed in some things. They believed in helping those who stood beside you in a storm. They believed in work done properly. Cargo nets secured. Schedules honored. They did not yet fully understand how abruptly a life could shift. The Ethel supervisor called out, their glow flashing stern yellow. "Bay 9 is behind. Less talking, more moving." Kalen flushed a soft, embarrassed green and waved acknowledgement. They had let their focus drift upward, to the observation deck where that human child watched with unblinking attention. She had returned for 3 shifts now, staying for part of each work period. Her small face pressed to the glass like a fish studying a world beyond water. Humans amused Kalen. Angular. All sharp bones and tight muscles wrapped in fabrics that showed no mood. Their voices sounded like falling gravel, rough consonants, strange rhythms, but their laughter came easily. The girl had waved once. Kalen pretended not to notice, more shyness than rudeness, but the gesture lodged in their memory. Now, as they hooked a cargo pod to the magnetic rail, Kalen felt the station's familiar tremor beneath their feet. Station Kesh 7 sighed and adjusted, gravity compensators humming, air scrubbers clicking through their quiet cycles. On the observation deck, Mira shifted restlessly. Around her, the corridor smelled of recycled oxygen and the sharp spice from a nearby noodle stall. Her parents argued in hushed voices about visiting the free trade bazaar 3 decks down. "Just a quick loop," her father said. "We'll stay in the main ring." "It's chaotic," her mother replied. "And there's that cargo dispute. I don't want her crushed in a crowd. She's not made of glass, Nina." Mira ignored them. Her breath had left another small fogged circle. She wiped it clean and pressed closer. The Ethal with spiral patterns glanced upward, as if feeling her gaze. Kalen saw the child again, saw her lean forward, saw her lips shape a sound, some human word Kalen didn't know. but the meaning was unmistakable. Hello. On impulse, Kalen raised one hand. Fingers spread, the Ethal gesture of greeting, their glow shifting to a calm, pale blue. The girl's face exploded into a grin. She spun, grabbed her father's sleeve fiercely, pointed downward, words tumbling too fast for Kalen to follow through the glass. Her father looked, smiled, answered her. Then everything shook. The first blast was a deep, gut-level impact, felt before heard. The deck lurched sideways beneath Kalen's feet, nearly throwing them into the cargo pod. A ribbon of fire and vapor burst from a cracked fuel line at the far end of docking ring 6, engulfing 3 stacked freight containers. Emergency shields flickered, then failed. Superheated gas roared into open air. On the observation deck, the windows flared white as blast shutters attempted to descend. They were old, slow. The station's designers had never truly believed in worst-case scenarios. The second explosion tore through the floor plates. Bulkheads began slamming shut across the station, automated responses to sensor screams. Compartmentalization was designed to save lives, seal the breach, starve the fire, but people were in the way. Mira felt the world jump under her. She heard her mother scream her name, felt a hand grab for her sleeve, and miss. The floor tilted, her feet skidded. She slid away from her parents toward a corridor junction that was now a tunnel of black smoke. Ceiling lights turned blood red. An alarm klaxon hammered the air. Mira! Her mother lunged. A support beam dropped down, slamming into place, cutting her off. Mira coughed as a wave of superheated air hit her face. The far end of the corridor filled with smoke so thick it looked solid. She could hear hissing, a sound like something enormous sucking in breath. Emergency doors along the passage began to move, heavy panels grinding shut. Station Kesh 7's central management system did its best, rerouted power, tried to isolate the breach. It did not know there was a human child in Section C7, trapped between a growing fire and a closing door. Kalen knew only what their eyes showed them, a blossoming inferno at the far end of the ring. A section of hull peeled back like torn paper. Alarm icons flashing red over docking corridor C7. They faintly heard the higher-pitched shriek of decompressing air. "Everyone to safe zones," shouted the Ethal supervisor. "Docking ring C is compromised." Workers dropped tools and ran for the nearest sealed hatches. A human dock officer yelled into a hand radio, then sprinted after them. The air tasted of burning insulation, bitter and electric. Kalen turned toward the safe corridor. They hesitated, above them. Behind layers of metal, composite, and transparent shielding, a human child had waved at them. On stations like this, children stayed close to parents. Parents stayed close to exits. It was safer, smarter, more likely. The alarm over C7 shrieked again, insistent. Kalen saw in their mind's eye a small face pressed to glass, wide eyes. You don't calculate courage. You just move. "Kalen!" their supervisor shouted. "Move!" Kalen ran, but not toward the safe hatch. They sprinted toward the nearest access ladder, hands grabbing rungs that had become slick with vibration. The ladder well trembled around them. A line of Ethal workers pushed past in the opposite direction, their glow jagged with fear. "You're going the wrong way," one cried. "There is a child," Kalen answered, already 3 rungs up toward the viewing deck. "Security will get them," another shouted. Kalen didn't slow. Security was on the far side of the collapsing ring. Bulkheads were closing. The mental map of docking ring C, built from years of work, unfolded before them. Pressure doors, emergency seals, blind corridors. C7 was narrow. It would close fast. Kalen burst onto the viewing deck access corridor into a red-lit fog. Smoke curled along the ceiling, shunted by struggling ventilators. Humans staggered past, some limping, some carrying others. A station officer in a scorched uniform waved evacuees toward a safe hatch. "Section C7 is sealed," he shouted into his comm. "We still have people inside." Kalen pushed past him, ignoring his startled curse. "Child," Kalen gasped. "Small human child." The officer grabbed their arm. "It's sealed. You can't." A high, thin cough came from down the corridor. Beyond a half-lowered emergency door, Mira. A woman's voice screamed from the other side of a thick bulkhead. Mira, answer me. The officer swore and let go. Door's jammed. We don't have cutters here. I do not need cutters, Kalen said. They ran. The emergency door hung crooked in its frame, lowered to waist height, its bottom edge warped by heat blistering the floor. Beyond it, the corridor swam in smoke. Lights flickered. The far end was a hellish glare where fire chewed closer. The atmospheric hiss grew louder. The corridor was bleeding air. On the other side, small hands scrabbled at the floor, fingers feeling blindly for the slim gap beneath the door. Kalen dropped to their knees, slid onto their side, pushed into the narrowing space as the massive door shuddered downward in fits and starts. The hot edge burned against their shoulders. Metal scraped glowing lines down their bioluminescent skin. They forced their torso under, exhaled, flattened themselves. The door ground lower, pinned their rib cage. Pain shot through them, sharp and bright. Smoke poured over their face. Kalen's outstretched hand brushed small fingers. They grabbed Mira's wrist, pulled. The door dropped another fraction. Bone grated. Kalen did not let go. Mira coughed, eyes streaming. The world had become noise and heat and terror. The glowing person from below was here. Suddenly, their face inches from hers. Eyes wide and shining, colors strobing in frantic patterns. Breathe shallowly, Kalen rasped in halting trade tongue. I have you. They braced one heel against the doorframe and pushed, straining. The warped metal gave a centimeter. It was enough. Kalen dragged Mira through. Ignored the scrape of the deck against the child's knees. Ignored the white-hot line of the door edge cutting into their own flesh. The moment they felt her clear, they yanked themselves backward. A desperate wriggle, rolled free as the door slammed the last of the way down with a teeth-rattling thud. The far end of the corridor crumpled inward. A vortex of debris and air roared past, howling against the sealed door. The station shuddered as the exposed section of ring tore away into vacuum. Silence fell. Thick and uncanny. After so much noise, only the deeper alarms remained. Cycling endlessly, Kalen lay on the floor, chest heaving. Vision spotted with dark motes. Their arms were a mess of burns and crushed tissue. Each breath hurt, but there was a small living weight against their side. Mira made a hiccuping sound, half sob, half cough, and clung to them, fingers digging into their skin, her face pressed against the brighter patches of their glow. You are safe, Kalen whispered. Switching to the human language they had practiced in quiet hours. Their accent was heavy, but clear. Stay still. The world blurred around them. Later, the images would be replayed 1,000 times. Security footage of an alien dock worker slamming their own body into a closing door, forcing it open with bare limbs, emerging with a soot-smeared human child in their arms. But in the moment, there were no spectators, no audience. There was only one being acting on instinct, and another clinging to them as the air cleared and emergency lights stabilized. Captain Eva Cade watched that footage for the first time nearly 6 hours later in a makeshift command post, hastily assembled in a cargo lounge. At that moment, she was not yet an admiral. She wore a captain's rank on her shoulders, her dark hair still unmarked by age, her jaw unshaven from the long shift. Run that back, she said quietly. The clip replayed. The Ethal, identified as Kalen in the incident report, dove under the closing door again and again. Each frame a study in reckless commitment. One of the station's human administrators leaned over her shoulder. Docking Ring C failed catastrophically. The backup seals were 10 years overdue for replacement. If that door hadn't jammed, the kid would have been crushed. If it had closed faster, the Ethal would have been cut in half. And if Kalen hadn't done anything? Cade asked, though she knew the answer. The administrator shrugged, face tight. Then we'd be filling out one more casualty form. Cade's gaze lingered on the end of the clip. Medics arrived, peeled the child away from the Ethal's battered body. Even through low resolution, she could see the way Mira reached back. fingers seeking Kalen's, unwilling to break that last grip. "Status on the dock, worker?" she asked. "Serious burns, crushed ligaments, some cracked bones. The station's facilities aren't equipped for full regeneration, but we've stabilized them." The administrator hesitated. "We were going to put them in stasis and ship them out on a later medical transport. Beds are limited in the premium care bays after this mess." "Transfer them to my ship," Cade said without hesitation. "We have spare capacity in the infirmary. Full treatment. Human standard." The administrator blinked. "That's generous, Captain." Cade's mouth thinned. "They didn't ask which standard of care the child was entitled to when they crawled under that door." She tapped the console. "And make sure this gets on the net with names. Kalen, Mira Vasquez. People deserve to know." Her words carried more weight than she realized. By the time her ship cleared Station Kesh 7's traffic mesh 2 days later, the story had already run across human networks. Segments replayed the footage between updates on trade routes and political disputes. Commentators praised Kalen's bravery, their instinctive moral courage. Cade watched one such broadcast in her tiny wardrobe, coffee cooling between her hands, and recorded a brief message for her superiors. "Dock worker Kalen of Saren risked their life for a human child with no expectation of reward," she said. "Recommend we extend all courtesies to their people in future dealings. We owe them at least that much." She did not know then how far that small sentence would echo. Mira, sedated and bandaged, did not know she was at the center of a story. She only knew that when she woke in the med bay, there was a small warm hand in hers. Kalen lay on the adjacent bed, wrapped in regenerative gel, their glow dim but steady. Mira raised their joined hands slightly, eyes heavy. "You came," she whispered. Kalen's voice was a soft rasp in the darkened room. "You waved first." She smiled, drifted back into sleep, fingers still tangled with theirs. Before Mira's parents took her home to the Dharma frontier, she left Kalen a gift, a trinket. Cheap metal and synthetic fiber shaped like a tiny web of interlocking stars. A star-weave pendant her father had bought her in the bazaar, the one she had pressed into Kalen's hand briefly in the chaos before the fire. Kalen kept it. They didn't fully understand why, but it felt important. Years passed. The galaxy moved on to other crises. Trade lanes shifted. Alliances formed and frayed. The story of a dock worker's heroism became a small, bright thread in a much larger tapestry. On Saren, the star grew sicker. Dr. Lena and Lovu knew before most. From an observatory perched above the methane plains of a distant human-aligned moon, she watched the spectral lines of Saren's sun twist into worrying shapes. "Ahead of schedule," she murmured, fingers dancing over her console. "You're going to blow before your time, old thing." She sent her findings up the chain. The star was entering a phase of violent instability far sooner than Ethal predictions had indicated. Coronal mass ejections had already stripped several outer moons of their atmospheres. The planet's magnetosphere was straining. Her reports joined a chorus of similar warnings from other observatories. Models showed that within a few decades, maybe less, Saren's surface would become uninhabitable without massive intervention. Flares could bathe half the planet in lethal radiation. The Ethal High Council acknowledged the data, then buried it under layers of cautious bureaucracy. Mass evacuations were logistically daunting and culturally terrifying. Their people were bound to their oceans by history and biology. Leaving meant leaving more than a world. It meant leaving the songs that had grown there. Counselor Seek, head of one of Saren's more conservative blocks, summarized the feeling in a private meeting. "We will not stampede our people into the void because of human panic. We have time. We will study, negotiate, prepare." By the time they truly understood how little time remained, another shadow had fallen over their star. The Vorisk fleet arrived almost without warning. There had been rumors, of course. Stories of a predatory species with a taste for exploiting weak or endangered worlds. They came with sleek, jagged ships and efficient brutality, offering protection in exchange for resources, then tightening the noose. They preferred targets already destabilized by internal problems. Dying stars and frightened governments made fertile ground. When Vorusk signal spikes appeared near the Ashen Rift, a dense region of space close to Saren, some Ethal argued for immediate militarization. Others warned that arming themselves might provoke attack. Counselor Seek persuaded the Council to send only a token defensive force and a diplomatic delegation. Show preparedness but not aggression, they said. The Vorusk saw only opportunity. They swept out of the Ashen Rift with a lean, disciplined formation that made Ethal observers shiver. Their lead ships dropped into Saren's orbital plane like knives. They destroyed the outer defense satellites in less than an hour, then broadcast a simple message on all frequencies. Your star's dying, your military is weak, your choices are surrender, partnership, or extinction. Panic rippled through Saren's cities. The Ethal had never been conquerors. They had fleets for exploration and commerce, not war. Their defensive platforms were old, maintained out of obligation rather than conviction. Vorusk ships took up positions at key jump points and trade arteries, a loose blockade that could tighten at any moment. Their ground forces remained in orbit, a threat without yet being a presence, like a raised fist that hadn't fallen. In a cramped office on a crowded human station, Admiral Evacuation listened to the translated Vorusk transmission and felt cold anger settle in her chest. She had risen through the ranks since the Station Kesh 7 disaster. Her name carried weight now in the Sol Defense Armada, still known as a cautious tactician, more likely to map evacuation routes than glory strikes. But she held in her memory an image of a bioluminescent arm wedged under a closing door. She had never met Kalen again. Data paths crossed, messages were lost. Life in the fleet left little room for personal pilgrimages. But she had not forgotten, nor had some of her colleagues. The story of Kalen and Mira had become a parable in certain circles, about cross-species solidarity, about going toward danger for the sake of another. So when reports came of the Vorusk tightening their hold around a world called Saren, old files were pulled. Someone noticed a line in a report. Kalen, origin, Saren. Someone else remembered Cade's firm recommendation years ago to honor that people. The message reaching Cade's desk was succinct. Ethal homeworld endangered. Star unstable. Vorusk presence established. No formal treaty with humans in place. Request assessment of possible intervention. Military and humanitarian. She pulled up star data. Dr. Endlovu's latest research. Watched simulations of flares lashing out like whips, scorching continents. We step in, she said, almost before the question had fully formed. The liaison officer on the other end of the secure channel raised an eyebrow. Without a treaty, the Council is reluctant to risk an interspecies war over a world that isn't ours. This isn't about owning worlds, Cade replied. It's about who we are. The liaison hesitated. You'll need more than moral arguments. The Vorusk are no joke. They'll fight. And the star itself, our projections show real risk to any fleet operating in close orbit. We could lose ships before firing a shot. Then we design a plan that keeps us out of the kill radius as much as possible, Cade said. She gestured at the model of Saren's system floating above her desk. But we go, quietly if need be, under the banner of humanitarian relief, evacuations, escort, a shield between a predator and its prey. She thought of Mira as a child, soot-streaked fingers linked to the glowing hand that had saved her. She had read follow-up reports years later. Mira had recovered, grown, joined the fleet. Cade opened her mouth, closed it again. She had an idea that wasn't strictly regulation. We can dress it up in strategy, she said more slowly. Stabilizing a point near a dying star gives us data we'll need when it happens to us. Testing the Solaris Loom project in a high-risk environment moves the science ahead. Securing a foothold near the Ashen Rift has obvious traffic benefits. Call it a multi-purpose operation with humanitarian and research components. And the deeper reason? The liaison asked, though he already knew. Cade met his gaze through the display. Because when one of them saved one of ours, they didn't hesitate. Within the week, tasking orders flowed out across human-controlled space. Ship captains read them with varying degrees of surprise. The mission had an official name: Operation Dawn Shield. Its public brief spoke of stellar stabilization tests, evacuation corridor security, and containment of an emerging predatory threat. Unofficially, in wardrooms and mess halls, another phrase spread: paying the debt. The ISS Far Step Endeavour was one of the first ships assigned. Captain Anja Soto stood on its bridge, hands clasped behind her back as the details arrived. She was short, compact, with the expression of someone always counting variables. Her crew trusted her to make the right call when those variables turned against them. "We're the spear point?" she asked Cade during a secure briefing. "You're the needle," Cade corrected. "We're not trying to punch through a line, we're stitching corridors safe. Your job is to slip in, map the edges of the Vorisk net, establish contact with sympathetic elements on Saren." She nodded to the others in the holographic briefing space. "Dr. Lena Endlovu, your forward science lead. She knows the star better than anyone outside Ethal own minds. Noah Benari, systems integration for the Solaris Loom components. Arturo Velez, primary cultural liaison with the Ethal. Sergeant Yosef Darzi, marine detachments if things on the surface get ugly. And Ensign Mira Vasquez, nav and comms, bridge between all of them." Mira straightened at the mention of her name. Her hair pulled back in a simple tie, her uniform plain. But there was a quiet intensity in her eyes. Cade watched her for a moment, seeing in her both the soot-streaked child and the disciplined officer she had become. "Questions?" she asked. "How much resistance from command are we expecting if this goes sideways?" Captain Soto asked bluntly. Cade's lips twitched. "Plenty. So let's do our best to make it go right. We're threading a needle between a dying star and an ambitious predator. We won't get a second chance to make a first impression on the Ethal." Mira swallowed and raised a hand. "Sir, the Ethal. Do we have any specific individuals we can reference to show this isn't just abstract policy?" Cade's gaze flicked to her. For a heartbeat, her expression softened. "Dock worker Kalen, Station Kesh 7, she said quietly. "You may remember them." Mira's throat tightened. Of course she remembered. In nightmares and in quiet gratitude, she remembered the pressure of a glowing body pinning her down against a collapsing deck, the hiss of escaping air, the words, "You are safe." She had tried in the years since to find Kalen, letters sent via station administrators, routed through freight lines to Saren. Replies were sporadic, then ceased altogether as conditions on Saren worsened and the Vorisk presence grew. Now, hearing the name spoken in this context, she felt a fierce, almost painful hope. "Understood, sir," she said, her voice steady. The Far Step Endeavour departed human space under the guise of a standard patrol, then shifted to silent running as it approached the Ashen Rift. Its hull bristled with antennas and folded frameworks, the skeleton of the prototype Solaris Loom. In the engineering bays, Noah Benari walked the length of the Loom's components, hand trailing along the support struts. "It's not ready," she muttered. "It won't ever be ready, Doctor," Indalovu replied dryly from beside her. "Not in the way you mean. Stars don't wait for tidy engineering schedules," Noah snorted. "Stellar megastructures should at least have the decency to pass all their ground tests before we bolt them onto a flagship and jump into a collapsing system." She spoke, but she worked. Cables tightened, calibration routines run. They all knew the stakes. The Solaris Loom was designed to wrap around a star's magnetic field, feed disturbance data to anchored platforms. In theory, mitigate the most destructive outbursts by redistributing their energy along safer arcs. In theory. In practice, it had never been deployed near a star as unstable as Saren's. "If it fails, we lose a lot of expensive hardware," Noah said. "And?" Dr. Ndlovu asked. Noah met her gaze. "And a lot of people." "Then let's not let it fail," Dr. Ndlovu replied. Mira watched from the nav station as the Ashen Rift loomed on their displays. Not literally visible. Out the windows, space looked as dark and indifferent as ever, but sensors painted a vivid picture. pockets of warped gravity, tangled electromagnetic fields, drifting relics of dead stars. Vorisk liked to lurk in messes like this. Sergeant Yosef Darzi asked from the back of the bridge. Plenty of cover, Captain Soto nodded. Harder to track them, easier to stage surprise jumps. Keep your squads on rotation. If we get boarded, it'll be fast and ugly. Arturo Velez leaned against a console, watching the sensor traces. The Ethal will be watching too, he said. We should make sure the first thing they see is us not shooting. That depends on the Vorusk, Soto said. But yes, no sudden moves unless absolutely necessary. Mira's fingers danced over the controls, plotting a narrow course through gravitational eddies that could shred careless ships. Her heart beat faster than her training allowed. She caught her reflection in a dark panel. For an instant, she saw herself as that child again, peering through glass at a world bigger and stranger than she could grasp. Then the moment passed. She exhaled, steadied her breathing, guided the Endeavor into Saren's system. The first glimpse of the Ethal homeworld filled the main screen a few hours later. Saren was beautiful and wounded. Bands of clouds swirled over deep blue-green oceans, broken by chains of violet islands and white-capped waves. At the poles, faint auroral curtains shimmered, struggling against surges of radiation that made sensors hiss with static. The star it orbited glared unnaturally bright, writhing with sunspots and flares. It's worse, Dr. Endlovu murmured, eyes narrowed. Flare frequency is higher than last survey. Radiation belts are fat and lopsided. We stay too close for too long. Our hull will hum like a beehive. Closer to the planet, a ring of ships encircled the main jump vector, like sharks around wounded prey. Vorisk fleet signature, the tactical officer reported. At least 18 capital ships, plus a cloud of smaller escorts and drones. They've left gaps, but they're narrow, Arturo observed. They want traffic to keep flowing, keeps the Ethal dependent. Let them think they can still trade as long as they pay the toll. Let's make use of those gaps, Captain Soto said. Passive scans only. No shields up yet. We don't want to spook them. The Vorisk ships were harsh and angular, built for function over form, bristling with weapons. Their hulls bore no ornamentation, only serial markings and the cold, efficient geometry of war. From one of those ships, Warlord Karzun watched the approaching human signature and bared his teeth. Humans, he said, as if the word itself tasted sour. Late to the feast. An aide flicked talons over a console. Single capital-class vessel. Unusual framework attached. Power signatures suggest experimental equipment. Escorts holding back just outside the primary gravity well. So they're cautious, Karzun said. Or they think one ship will be enough to frighten us away from our new property. He considered. The Vorisk had clashed with humans before, usually over border worlds. The humans were stubborn and inventive, but their appetite for conquest was erratic. They preferred cooperative agreements, shared ventures, levers of influence rather than direct subjugation. Karzun found it all inefficient. Open a tight beam, he ordered. I want to see what kind of posturing they try first. On the Endeavor's bridge, an incoming hail chimed. Vorisk origin, Mira said quietly. High priority. Captain Soto straightened. Put it through. The main screen flickered, then resolved into the image of Warlord Karzun's face. Rigid, predatory, eyes like slivers of amber. Human vessel, he said, dispensing with preliminaries. You are entering a secured operational theater. The local species have requested our guidance and protection. State your business and your planned departure vector. Arturo stepped forward, inclining his head. This is Captain Anja Soto of the ISS Farstep Endeavor, operating under mandate from the Sol Defense Armada. We are here with two purposes: to study and mitigate the instability of this system's star, and to offer humanitarian assistance to any Ethal who wish to evacuate. Karzun's lips peeled back. It might have been a smile. A dying world is not your concern. We have reached an agreement with the Ethal Council. Their needs are being addressed. Your presence is unnecessary and unwelcome. Most of our agreements involve the other party still having full freedom of movement, Arturo said mildly. Blockades make us curious. Karzoon's eyes flicked sideways, taking in the loom frames attached to the Endeavor's hull. And that experimental contraption? Are you planning to leash the star? Our plans for the star are not your concern, Dr. Endlovu murmured under her breath. Soto lifted a hand to silence her. Aloud, Soto said, "We are not here to challenge your agreements with the Ethal. We are here to offer options. If any Ethal wish to leave, we will escort them safely out of the system. If your agreements allow for free immigration, surely this is no threat to you." Karzoon's gaze hardened. You play with language. The Ethal will do as their council decides, and their council has chosen to remain. No mass exodus, no destabilizing panic. He leaned closer to his pickup. And certainly no foreign warships hovering over their cradle, pretending to be saviors. Then let us speak directly with the council, Arturo said. If they confirm that they do not wish us here, we will withdraw. Karzoon considered. There was confidence in his posture. He believed he controlled the council. He did, in fact, control much of it, through threats and carefully structured dependencies. Very well, he said. I will convey your request. In the meantime, you will hold position no closer than this. Coordinates pinged on Endeavor's navigation display. A point just outside the densest band of Vorusk ships. Any attempt to break the perimeter will be treated as hostile. Soto's jaw tightened. We are here in peace. We will hold your line for now. But understand this, Warlord. If we detect any genocide, any forced sterilizations, any mass killings dressed up as necessary population management, we will not stand aside. Karzoon stared at her as if she were a curious insect. You are in no position to threaten. He cut the channel without further word. Silence settled on the Endeavor's bridge. We're in position, Mira said quietly. Her hand steadied on the controls, but her mind churned. Somewhere down there, beneath clouds and oceans, Kalen might be listening to similar transmissions, might be watching strange new ships in their sky. Arturo, Soto said, start working diplomatic channels through any back doors we have. Old trade brokers, cultural exchanges, research partnerships. If the official council is compromised, we need alternate lines in. She turned to Dr. Endlovu. Lena, begin scans on the star. I want to know exactly how much time the Ethal have, and how close we can get before we start cooking. She looked to Mira. Ensign Vasquez, you're on liaison duty with any Ethal signals we catch. Your language scores are highest. If anyone calls for help, I want you to hear it first. Yes, Captain, Mira said. Hours became a day. Then 2. Then 3. Vorusk ships shifted in slow patterns, adjusting their blockade nets. Ethal transmissions, when they slipped past Vorusk censorship filters, carried a note of mounting desperation. Arturo and his small team sat hunched over translator suites, parsing the emotional undercurrents beneath formal phrases. They're scared, Arturo said during one late-night briefing, eyes shadowed. But they're divided. Some think we're just another predator circling, waiting for the Vorusk to weaken them. Others remember our trade missions, our joint research. They want us to help. They're arguing among themselves about whether accepting evacuation is an act of cowardice or survival. Can we reach anyone sympathetic in their government? Admiral Cade's image asked from the holographic table. She had remained with the larger fleet, hanging back at the edge of the system, ready to move in if needed. We have a line to a counselor, Leroy, Arturo said. Technically a medic and community leader, not high in the power hierarchy but respected. They've been trying to organize local shelters against radiation surges. They want more data on the star. He paused. They also mentioned a friend, a dock worker named Kalen, living in one of the coastal arcologies most at risk from direct flare impact. Mira's heart leaped. She forced herself to keep her voice level. Can we establish direct contact? We're trying, Arturo said. Vorusk are jamming some frequencies and monitoring others. But the local Ethal mesh is more resilient than the Vorusk accounted for. Old habits of redundancy. We might be able to slip a narrow band through. Cade nodded. Do it. Meanwhile, we're not waiting forever on their council. The Loom needs to be deployed before the next big flare, or there may not be much left to save. Dr. Ndlovu brought up her latest models. The holographic star above the table churned, its surface riven with active regions. We have a major event building on the far side, she said. Within 5 days, maybe 3, a flare powerful enough to strip half of Saren's atmosphere could erupt. If the planet happens to be facing the wrong way when it hits, coastal cities will be hammered by radiation. Our only chance to blunt it is to get the Loom in place before it peaks. That means moving closer, Captain Soto said. Right past that Vorusk line. They ran simulations. Argued probabilities. Best case, Dr. Ndlovu said. We wrap the Loom around the star's magnetic field, redistribute the flare's energy along safer lines, and buy the Ethal years. Worst case, we trigger a premature flare in the wrong direction and make everything worse. Cade watched the swirling projections. Is there a middle case where we do nothing and the star obligingly waits until everyone is comfortable? Dr. Ndlovu's mouth quirked. No. Then we act, Cade said. She issued orders. The Sol Defense Armada advanced slowly, arraying its ships in a wide arc that extended beyond the Vorusk blockade. It was not a wall of war. It was something stranger, less familiar to the militaristic Vorusk, a corridor. Channels marked in space with beacons and encrypted pulse codes, advertising safe lanes for evacuation ships. If the Ethal want to leave, Cade said, we'll make sure they can. The Vorusk did not like that. On the 4th day, Vorusk raiders tested the human line, darting in toward one of the newly established corridors. On the Endeavor's bridge, alarms chimed. Flotilla at bearing 321, closing on Corridor Delta. Weapons hot. Any traffic in that lane? Soto asked. One freighter, unarmed, carrying civilian transponders. They've broadcast a distress call. Arturo's voice was tight. If the Vorusk intercept them, they'll make an example of them publicly, to discourage others from trying. Soto didn't wait for further data. Route our course to intercept. Darcy, prepare boarding teams. And Ndlovu, Noah, keep an eye on our exposure to the star. We may have to sprint in and out. The Endeavor surged forward, its engines flaring. Vorusk ships adjusted, some turning to meet it, others pressing toward the helpless freighter. Ensign Vasquez, Soto said, open a channel to that freighter. Tell them to hold their course, and their nerve. Mira's hands flew. Channel open. This is the ISS Farstep Endeavor to Ethal vessel. Translation, Singing Tides. We see you. Stay on your current vector. We are coming. A voice answered, wavering, thick with the Ethal's musical cadence. We see your light. The captain of the Singing Tides said, our children are on board. The Vorusk will not touch you if they value their hulls, Soto cut in. Trust us. The Vorusk did not. They continued closing, intent on demonstrating the futility of defiance. Admiral Cade's voice came over the fleet net. Endeavor, you are clear to engage. Non-lethal if possible. Make this a statement, not a massacre. Soto smiled without humor. Copy that, Admiral. The next minutes were a blur of schoolbook maneuvers that would be replayed in tactical academies for decades. The Endeavor slid between the Singing Tides and the lead Vorusk raider, presenting its heavily shielded flank. It fired a spread of ion disruptors, not calibrated to lethal intensity, but tuned to overload the raider's control systems. At the same time, it launched a cloud of drones that bloomed into dazzling distraction flares, confusing targeting arrays. The raider's first volley glanced off Endeavor's shields, making the deck hum. The second never came. Its weapons grid went dark under the ion barrage. Sergeant Darcy's Marines stood by drop pods, ready to board if any Vorusk tried to grapple. Second raider adjusting vector, Tactical reported, trying to swing around and hit the freighter from the other side. Noah, give me a slingshot. Soto said, "Oe." Noah's fingers flew over the engineering console, diverting extra power to portside thrusters. Brace. The Endeavor lurched in a tight arc that would have torn a less robust ship apart, coming around in front of the second raider, its own mass now a moving wall. "Ensign Vasquez," Soto said, "thread us through that gap on my mark. 3, 2, 1. Mira's mind narrowed to a line, the narrow, safe passage between a swirling radiation pocket and the edge of a Vorusk minefield. She adjusted their trajectory by fractions, felt the ship respond. The Endeavor skimmed past the second raider, close enough that its hull sensors screamed proximity warnings. Darzy's Marines launched 2 pods in their wake, attaching like barnacles to the raider's belly. Within minutes, Vorusk gun crews found themselves staring down the barrels of human shock rifles. The Singing Tide slipped through the improvised corridor, its engines straining. On Saren's surface, in a coastal arcology battered by tidal storms, Kalen watched the feed on a communal display. They didn't consider themselves politically astute. They knew cargo vectors and tide patterns, not the intricate dances of fleets. But they knew courage when they saw it. The human ship moved like a living thing, interposing itself again and again between danger and the fragile. Kalen reached up, fingers touching the small starweave pendant hanging at their throat. "You see?" Leroy said beside them, eyes wide. "I told you the humans remembered." Kalen made a soft sound that might have been a laugh, might have been a sob. The Vorusk line stiffened after that engagement. Warlord Karzoon railed at his subordinates, then at the Ethal Council. "The humans are undermining stability," he growled over a secure channel patched into the council chamber. "They encourage flight. They embolden radicals." Councillor Seek, whose caution had curdled into fear, wrung their hands. "We did not ask them to come. We can petition them to leave." "Petition?" Karzoon spat. "You will do more than petition. You will denounce them publicly. You will declare that any who accept their help are traitors. Otherwise," he let the threat hang. Seek looked around the chamber. Some councillors nodded, eager to appease. Others looked down, torn. Leroy, who sat in the back rows as a non-voting advisor, met Seek's gaze steadily. "These humans are willing to risk their lives to save ours," Leroy said quietly. "Can we say the same?" Seek flinched. "We cannot provoke war." "War is upon us whether we acknowledge it or not," Leroy replied. "Between the Star and the Vorusk, the only question is who stands with us when the flares come." Below the council chamber, in shelter bays hastily carved deeper into the crust, families huddled. Radiation levels on the surface had spiked twice in as many days. Each surge forced more Ethal underground, compressing their oceans of culture into crowded, humming caverns. Kalen walked among them, carrying medical kits, helping Leroy hand out damp cloths and reassurance. "There is still time," they told frightened children. "We have survived storms before." In their pocket, a small comm device slipped into the local mesh by Arturo's team, buzzed. They ducked into a side passage and answered. A human voice, distorted slightly by encryption, spilled out. "This is the ISS Farstep Endeavor. We have a narrow window to move people during a predicted lull between flares. Local leaders can designate priority groups for evacuation. We need volunteers to coordinate flows to the launch platforms." Kalen stared at the device. They saw again a station corridor filling with smoke. A door grinding shut. A tiny hand reaching. They did not hesitate. "I will do it," they said. At that same moment on the Endeavor, Mira heard the translation come through and felt something crack open in her chest. The voice was older now, roughened by time and hardship, but the cadence was unmistakable. "This is Kalen?" she asked, breaking protocol to cut into the channel. There was a pause. "This is Kalen," the Ethal replied cautiously. "Who is this?" "Mira Vasquez," she said. "Station Kesh 7, docking ring 6. Silence. Then a soft, incredulous sound. "You lived," Kalen said. "I wondered. The messages stopped coming." "The war with the Vorusk disrupted a lot of networks," Mira said. But I never stopped trying. Her throat tightened. We're here now. We're not leaving you to face this alone. Kaelin pressed their forehead against the cool arcology wall. I do not know if our council will agree. They are afraid of everything. Of you. Of the Vorisk. Of our own star. Then we go around them, Mira replied. Leroy is already working with our liaison. We have corridors opening. The Vorisk will try to close them, but we've shown we can hold. Her voice softened. Kaelin, when you pulled me through that door, you didn't stop to ask if my parents had signed the right forms. You just moved. We're doing the same. Kaelin's glow flared bright in the shadowed passage. What do you need me to do? They asked. In the frantic hours that followed, a pattern emerged. Kaelin became an anchor point in the coastal arcology, organizing lines of evacuees, calming panicked crowds with their steady presence. Leroy coordinated with other medics, prioritizing the sick and vulnerable. Arturo's team relayed instructions, adjusting in real time as Vorisk ships shifted to block one corridor and left another inadvertently open. Mira juggled channels with ferocious focus, switching between Vorisk threats, Ethal pleas, and fleet updates. She slept in snatches at her console. Sergeant Darcy's Marines escorted Ethal shuttles through the chaos, sometimes riding shotgun in armored pods, sometimes quietly sabotaging Vorisk sensor buoys to blind their pursuers. Dr. Ndlovu and Noah watched the star. It's building, Ndlovu said on the second day of evacuations. That big flare we predicted is coming ahead of schedule. The magnetic field is knotted like a rope about to snap. When it goes, it will not be gentle. Admiral Cade's fleet had already begun deploying the Solaris Loom. Segments unfolded from the larger ships, extending delicate arms of conductive material like spiderweb threads. They positioned themselves in orbit around the star, creating a loose, vast frame. This is madness, muttered one of Cade's senior captains during a private channel. We're hanging experimental tech around an angry star while playing tag with an aggressive fleet. If either one sneezes in our direction. Humanity has done madder things for less, Cade replied. We've thrown ships into black holes just to see what would happen. This, at least, is for something. She thought of all the evacuee lists scrolling past her terminals. Ethal names, each one as complex as any human's. Each attached to a beating heart, a web of relationships, a place in a culture. Give me your status, she said to Noah on the Endeavor. We're linked to 7 other Loom segments, Noah answered, fingers flying over controls. Field harmonics are within tolerance. The star's flux is loud, Admiral. Very loud. We're pushing our sensor arrays to the limit. Can we redirect a major flare? Cade asked. In theory, Noah said. If we catch it early enough, if our anchors hold, if the Vorisk don't decide to shoot at us while we're in the middle of it. Lots of ifs. Welcome to command, Cade said. We work with ifs. Warlord Karzoon watched the Loom unfolding with a mix of grudging respect and rising alarm. They mean to interfere with the star itself, he said to his officers. If they succeed, they extend the Ethal's window for resistance. If they fail, they may destabilize the system in ways that hurt us as well. A junior strategist cleared their throat. We could target the Loom segments, destroy them before they fully integrate, Karzoon considered. Destroying experimental human equipment carried risks. Humans were unpredictable when angered, but allowing the Loom to function might embolden both them and the Ethal. He called up a model of the system. Human ships were positioned in a wide arc that made a direct assault costly. We will test them, he said. Send a flanking group to harry their outer segments. Nothing overtly escalatory. Let us see how much they are willing to risk for this Loom. Vorisk raiders peeled off from the blockade, arcing toward the Loom's outer anchors. Sensors on the Endeavor pinged. Vorusk movement, Tactical reported. Bearing 590, moving toward Loom segment Alpha 7. That's one of ours, Noah said sharply. If they hit it while it's sinking, the feedback could cascade. Admiral Cade's voice cut in on the fleet net. Endeavor, you are closest. Intercept. Soto didn't wait. Mira, plot us a path. Darcy, prep for possible boarding. Lena, Noah, Tell me how close we can skim the star without frying everyone on board. Dr. Ndlovu's eyes flicked across sensor readouts. We can dive another 15% deeper into the gravity well for a short burst. Any more, and we risk hull integrity. Give me that 15%, Soto said. We'll slingshot around the star, come up under the raiders and scare them off the segment. It's not a planet, Noah muttered. You can't just treat it like a handy billiard ball. You once told me stars are just big balls of plasma, Soto replied. Big ball, small ball, it's all gravity. Mira's mouth was dry. This was the kind of maneuver simulator instructors had labeled with words like theoretical and career limiting. She plotted it anyway. The Endeavour dove inward, its frame groaning as gravity and radiation bit into it. Shields flared, then dimmed as Noah redirected every spare watt to field stabilization. From Saren's surface, some Ethal who dared look up through the heavy filter screens saw a brief bright line streak across their sky. Too swift and precise to be a natural phenomenon. The Endeavour curved around the star, emerging on a vector the Vorisk raiders had not anticipated. Its opening volley did not target their hulls. Instead, it fired a salvo of gravitic pulses that nudged them off course by tiny but critical angles. One raider's engines flared asymmetrically. It veered, missing the Loom segment by a wide margin. The others corrected, but now the Endeavour was between them and their target. Karzun snarled as his tactical displays lit up. They treat our fleet like toys, he growled. Enough. Target that Loom segment anyway. If we cannot have this system on our terms, no one will. His gunnery officers hesitated. That could destabilize the star further, Warlord. Our ships are within— Fire! Karzun snapped. On their readouts, Dr. Ndlovu watched power spikes lance toward the Loom. Impact in 12 seconds, Tactical said. 11. Can we move it? Cade asked. Noah's mind ran numbers. Not laterally, not fast enough, but we might be able to use the hit. Cade stared at her. Explain. Quickly. The Loom is designed to catch and redirect energy, Noah said. If we adjust its field coupling, we might be able to shunt the blast's impact into the star's own magnetic lines, like pushing a wave back into the ocean instead of letting it crash on the shore. Do it, Cade said. Noah's hands blurred. The Loom's field parameters shifted in response. The Vorisk volley struck. For a terrifying instant, the nearest Loom segment flared white, overloaded. Feedback arced along its frame. Then the new couplings grabbed hold. The energy fell into resonance with the star's own throbbing pulse and sank. The star jolted. On Saren's day side, the sky rippled with auroral curtains. Compasses whirled. For a dreadful minute, every living thing on the surface felt a pressure in their bones, a sense of vast alien movement. Then slowly, the pressure eased. Field integrity holding, Noah whispered. We did it. We actually did it. The Loom absorbed and redirected most of that impact. Dr. Ndlovu exhaled. The flare buildup has shifted. We've altered the timing and location. It will still happen, but with less direct impact on Saren's most populated regions. We bought them time. On the Vorisk flagship, Karzun stared at his screens in disbelief. They caught our shot, he said. And used it. A strategist swallowed. Warlord, if the humans can moderate the star's worst outbursts, the Ethal may not be as desperate. They may not accept your terms. Karzun's claws dug into the arm of his command chair. Then we will give them a different reason to accept. Prepare to deploy ground forces. If the Ethal will not surrender to the inevitability of the sky, they will surrender to the reality of boots on their soil. On Saren, evacuation efforts had doubled in intensity as sensor readings wobbled. Kalen moved like a steady current through waves of chaos, guiding families toward shuttles, ensuring each child's hand found an adult's. Between her tasks, Mira stole moments to talk with them over the crackling comms. I wish I could be down there, she said once, watching a grainy image of Kalen's glowing form on her console. You are up there, Kalen replied. Catching fire so it does not fall on us. That seems important. I remember your burns, Mira said softly. How badly you were hurt. Kalen glanced at the faint scars on their limbs, barely visible under their shifting patterns. Now they healed. You send good doctors. Mira smiled. We try. The next crisis came without warning. Vorisk dropships punched through the atmosphere on steep, fiery trails, aiming for key arcologies that had shown signs of defiance. Karzoon had decided that fear from above was no longer enough. He wanted boots echoing in Ethal halls. Ground incursion detected, Tactical announced on the Endeavor. Multiple vectors. Targets include coastal arcologies, Theta 9 and Delta 4. Our marine teams are in orbit, but we can't be in two places at once. Mira's blood ran cold. Theta 9 was Kalen's arcology. Sergeant Darcy's voice came over the internal net. We're ready to drop, Captain. Just say the word. Soto's jaw clenched. We cannot intercept all those dropships. If we divert everything to Theta 9, Delta 4 will fall. If we split our forces, we risk losing both. Voices rose in the tactical planning channel. Some argued for focusing on the more densely populated arcology, others for the one with critical infrastructure. Admiral Cade cut through the noise. We honor debts, but we also honor lives we do not know. We'll divide, but not equally. Darcy, take your crack squads to Theta 9. The rest of the fleet will assign secondary teams to Delta 4. Arturo, signal any Ethal defense forces still capable of fighting. This will have to be joint. She paused, then added quietly. Mira, this will put our Marines in direct harm's way. You understand why we can't send everything to your friend? Mira's throat tightened, but she nodded. Yes, sir. Kalen would not accept help that damns others in their place. Darcy's Marines loaded into drop pods. Each pod held a tight-knit squad. Faces set, weapons checked. Remember, Darcy said over the squad channel as the pod sealed. We are not occupiers. We're guests fighting in someone else's house. Respect that. Protect civilians first, pride second. The pods fired, streaking through Saren's atmosphere like a new kind of meteor swarm. In Theta 9, Kalen had just shepherded the last group of evacuees into a shuttle bay when the first Vorisk dropship howled overhead, its wake rattling the entire structure. Vorisk! Someone screamed. They're coming here! Panic surged. Some Ethal tried to stampede back into the corridors, away from the launch platforms, as if deeper into the arcology's bones meant safety. Others froze, their bioluminescent patterns flaring in chaotic colors. Kalen climbed onto a stack of crates, amplifying their voice through a local speaker. Stop, they commanded. Listen. Miraculously, enough did. We have lived our lives by the tides, Kalen said, voice steady. When storms came, we went to high ground or to deep caves, together. We did not scatter across the rocks. The humans are here to help us leave. The Vorisk are here to keep us afraid. Choose who you will trust, but do not get trampled in your own fear. Leroy, standing at their side, nodded. Those who wish to fight, stand with me. Those who wish to leave, follow Kalen. There is no shame in either choice today, only different forms of courage. Roughly half the crowd moved toward the shuttles. The rest clustered, frightened, but resolved. Behind Leroy, Kalen jumped down, heart hammering. Somewhere above, metal screamed as the Vorisk dropship made contact with the arcology. Kalen, they whispered into their comm, though they didn't know if the channel remained stable through so much interference. If you can hear this, now would be a good time. Mira heard. The Endeavor's displays lit up with incoming telemetry from the drop pods. Pods crossing upper atmosphere, Tactical said. Entry heat nominal, landing in 30 seconds. Saren's sky lit up with streaking fire as human Marines fell. Vorisk troops stormed the main concourse of Theta 9, armed with energy rifles that spat crackling bolts. Ethal defenders, hastily armed with converted mining tools and a few outdated pulse weapons, scrambled to form lines. The first clash was brutal. Vorisk weapons tore through cover. Ethal fell, their glow fading. Then Darcy's pod smashed through the Arcology's gravity wells, using precisely calculated vectors to hit auxiliary docks and maintenance bays rather than central squares. Pod doors blew open. Marines surged out, smoke shouting, the snap of gunfire. The Marines moved in disciplined pairs and squads, covering one another, treating civilians as precious cargo rather than obstacles. Darcy himself led the push toward the central concourse, his armor streaked with scorch marks. He saw a Vorisk squad advancing on a group of unarmed Ethal children, weapons raised. He didn't think. He moved. His squad laid down a blistering volley. Vorisk armor sparked and buckled. One went down. Another pivoted, returning fire. Darcy felt a burning line across his side, but stayed on his feet. "Human soldiers," one of the stunned Ethal whispered, wide-eyed. "We're not here to take your world," Darcy grunted, glancing at them briefly. "We're here to make sure you have one to leave." He keyed his comm. "Endeavor, this is Ground Squad Alpha. Engaged Vorisk forces in Theta 9. Civilians present, we could use some lovely orbital support. The non-lethal kind. On the bridge?" Soto nodded. "Target Vorisk concentrations with stun ordnance. Knock them on their backs. Keep collateral minimal. They chose to bring this fight into someone else's home. They can live, or not, with the embarrassment." Pulses of tightly tuned concussion waves rained down, slamming into Vorisk troops, throwing them off balance, rattling their senses. Under that cover, Ethal defenders surged, emboldened by the unexpected alliance, their bioluminescent patterns synchronizing in bands of determined blue, an old cultural signal for solidarity. In the chaos, Kalen and Leroy got the last wave of evacuees to the shuttles. Kalen hesitated at the ramp of the final craft, looking back at the Arcology's curved corridors that had been their whole world. "Go," Leroy urged. "You have other tides to cross now." "You," Kalen asked. "I stay," Leroy said. "For those who cannot leave yet, someone must be here when the next wave comes." Kalen's throat tightened. They reached up, fingers brushing Leroy's cheek. "Then, may the quiet waters find you again." They turned and boarded. Mira tracked that shuttle's signature on her display. It had no personal label, just an anonymous alphanumeric code. But she knew. "Captain," she said, "we have a shuttle from Theta 9 clearing atmosphere. It's heading toward Corridor Beta near our position." "Vorisk pursuit?" Soto asked. "2 interceptors," Tactical replied. "They're fast. The shuttle's engines are overloaded. Just staying ahead." "Not this time," Mira whispered. Louder, she said. "We can move to screen them, but we'll expose ourselves to crossfire." Admiral Cade's voice came through, hard. "Do it! We promised. No half measures." The Endeavor pivoted, swinging into a vector that placed it directly between the pursuit and the shuttle. Vorisk interceptors adjusted, their pilots too angry to break off. "Shields up," Soto said. "Fire a warning spread. Let them know we're serious." The Endeavor's guns spoke. Several Vorisk shots glanced off its hull, but its armor held. One interceptor took a glancing hit and spiraled away. The other, more stubborn or more reckless, kept coming. On the shuttle's cramped deck, Ethal huddled together. Kalen stood near the front, one hand on the bulkhead, feeling the tremors through the metal. "Look," whispered a child, pointing at the view screen. The human ship loomed there, vast and strange, interposing itself like a mountain. "They came," Kalen said softly. The Vorusk interceptor pilot saw that too. They also saw that if they continued, they would have to either back down or fire directly at a human warship, escalating the conflict. For a moment, their talons tensed. There, Karzoon's voice crackled over their link. "Withdraw. We will not be drawn into full-scale war over one shuttle. There will be others we can make examples of." The interceptor peeled away. The shuttle shuddered as it passed into the human-protected corridor. Sensors on the Endeavor confirmed its safe entry into the evacuation line. Mira sat back in her chair, eyes burning. She allowed herself only one heartbeat of relief before turning back to her instruments. There were other dots on the screen. Other lives. The battle for Saren continued for days. Not as a single cataclysmic clash, but as a series of sharp, desperate engagements. The Vorisk tried to tighten their blockade. The humans punched holes. The star rumbled. The Loom flexed and held, absorbing some outbursts, redirecting others. In homes deep beneath the sea, Ethal families debated, sometimes bitterly, whether to leave the world that had shaped them. Arturo moderated tense video councils between human officers and Ethal leaders, balancing honor and pragmatism. "We cannot take everyone at once," he said during one session. "We are building a bridge in the middle of a flood. But we can get many, and we can keep building as long as the Loom holds." Counselor Seek, once so cautious, now sounded tired. "We were afraid of panic, afraid of losing ourselves in the void. Now I see, we feared the wrong thing. Extinction without choice is worse than leaving with dignity." Seek's eyes glimmered faintly. "Tell your admiral, we accept your assistance officially." Admiral Cade received that message in her flag cabin. She read it twice, then forwarded it to the wider fleet. "You heard the council," she said. "They asked. We answer. All ships, ramp up evacuation capacity. I want every shuttle we can spare running that corridor, and keep one eye on the Loom at all times. If it falters, this whole operation becomes a race against fire." They worked accordingly. Human crews established makeshift way stations in the shadow of Saren's outer moons, refueling shuttle engines, treating radiation sickness, offering Ethal bewildering new foods. There were moments of culture shock and awkwardness. On one ship, a human cook watched a group of Ethal regarding a pot of stew with polite confusion. "It's hot," one said. "We eat mostly at ambient ocean temperature." The cook shrugged. "We can turn it down. But trust me, on a day like this, a little warmth in your bones can feel like defiance." The Ethal tried it. Their glow patterns shifted in surprise and slow appreciation. "You give us warmth while your machines catch fire for us," one murmured. "You are a strange species." The worst flare came on the 9th day. Dr. Ndlovu had seen it building, a monstrous knot in the star's field. "It's going to release whether we like it or not," she said to Cade over the net. "We've bought time. We've redirected smaller bursts, but this is the main event." "Options?" Cade asked. "We can try to channel it away from Saren's populated hemisphere. Use the Loom to shape and delay, but the stabilizing modulus is at the edge of what our materials can handle. If the Loom segments fail, they might fragment into the star or lash out unpredictably." "In other words, this is what we built it for," Noah said quietly. "Right here, exactly." Ndlovu nodded. Cade looked around at the faces in her command space, human and holographically projected. "This is the climax, not just for this mission, for the story we tell about ourselves. We can back off, save our ships, and watch a world burn a little slower. Or we can hold the line and see if we're actually as good as we like to think we are." No one suggested retreat. "Order all non-essential ships to maximum safe distance," Cade said. "Pull evac corridors back, just beyond the worst projected radiation belts. The Loom anchor ships and protective escorts will remain in close. We ride this out." The Loom lit up. Sensors recorded the star's surface bulging, magnetic lines snapping, plasma swirling into towering loops. The first wave of radiation slammed into human shields, making them flare dangerously. Noah's voice was calm and taut as she issued commands to the Loom's control interfaces. "Segment Beta 9, increase field resonance. Gamma 3, you're lagging, sync to new phase. Watch your thermal loads. We're going to slingshot this flare-down system, away from Saren's orbital track, on Saren's surface." The sky turned strange colors. Auroras writhed even near the equator. Some Ethal wailed, convinced this was the end. Others crouched in shelters, holding hands, listening to human and Ethal voices alike over loudspeakers, assuring them that the shield was holding. In Theta 9's half-ruined concourse, Leroy stood with remnants of their defenders, watching the filtered sky through a cracked dome. "Do you believe them?" a young Ethal asked. "The humans?" Leroy looked at the sky, then at the small comm device in their hand. Through it, they heard Noah's strained, precise orders, Dr. Endlovu's muttered calculations, Soto's steady commands. "Yes," Leroy said simply. "I do." The flare crested. The Loom met it. In orbit, human crews gritted their teeth as consoles sparked and hulls trembled. Energy surged along the Loom's frame, seeking paths of least resistance. Carefully tuned fields bent it, curved it, shunted it along pre-planned arcs. Saren still took a hit. Some of its upper atmosphere boiled. One of its small uninhabited moons lost the last of its thin air. But the worst of it went sliding past, down system, where it would dissipate in empty space. On the Endeavor, alarms screamed, then gradually fell silent. "Status?" Soto demanded. Noah sagged in her chair, sweat dripping down her face. "We lost 3 Loom segments. Their frames overheated and had to be jettisoned. But the remaining network held. Radiation levels at Saren's surface are high, but survivable. We just turned an extinction-level event into something less." Dr. Endlovu's voice trembled. "We did it. We bought them decades, maybe longer if the star behaves." Cheers erupted across the human fleet. Some were wild and relieved, some quiet and odd. On Saren, Ethal stepped out of shelters, blinking at a sky that still roiled, but did not kill. Many fell to their knees, not in worship of humans or their machines, but in an overwhelmed gratitude that their children would see another tide. In a refugee bay on a human ship, Kalen stood by a window, hand pressed to the transparent alloy. Their glow shimmered with complicated patterns. Mira approached quietly. "You always did like watching docs," she said. Kalen turned. For a moment, they simply stared at each other. Time had altered them both. Mira was taller, her face a little sharper, her eyes lined with strain and responsibility. Kalen's scars had faded, but new lines of weariness traced their features. "You grew," Kalen said, stating the obvious because it felt safer than all the unsaid words. "So did you," Mira replied. Kalen reached up, touching the star-weave pendant at their throat. "You gave me this once, and then your people gave me back my life. Twice now." Mira shook her head. "The first time, you were the one who moved. We're just keeping the balance sheet honest." Kalen tilted their head, curious. "Balance sheet?" "A way we talk about debts," Mira said. "Who owes what to whom?" Kalen considered that. "If we count debts this way, we will always be chasing each other, never resting. I would rather count something else." "Like what?" Mira asked. Kalen moved a little closer to the window. Streams of shuttles moved between ships and the planet, tiny motes in the dark. Human vessels stood guard. Ethal lights flickered across docking bays. "You stepping toward us now," Kalen said. "Us stepping toward you later. Neither because of numbers, but because that is what we do." Mira smiled, feeling something in her chest unclench. "I like your accounting better," she said. The immediate crisis had passed, but the story was not neatly tied up. The Loom had held, this time. It would need maintenance, reinforcement. The star remained volatile. Evacuations would continue for years, shifting slowly from emergency scrambles to organized resettlement. Some Ethal would choose to stay, hardening their habitats and embracing the risk in exchange for never leaving their ancestral seas. The Vorusk, stung and chastened, withdrew their overt presence, but did not disappear. They licked their wounds on the other side of the Ashen Rift, plotting, reweaving their strategies. They would be back, in some form. In the corridors of human power, there were arguments. Some said the resources poured into Saren had been too great, the risks too high. Admiral Cade stood before one such assembled group, footage of flares and evacuation lines playing behind her. "You want metrics?" she said. "Fine. We gained real-time data on stellar stabilization that will be invaluable when any of our own worlds face similar threats." We established a durable alliance with a species caught between a dying star and a predator. We demonstrated to the Vorisk and others that preying on the vulnerable will not go unopposed. She paused, then added, but beyond all that, we affirmed something about ourselves, that if someone, anyone, steps between our children and a closing door, we remember. And when their time of need comes, we don't send a memo, we send a fleet. That, ultimately, was the story that spread. In human taverns on outer stations, merchants told it with embellishments, how human ships had danced with a star, how Marines had dropped like falling stars themselves, on Saren's new coastal enclaves, built on worlds far from their original sun. Ethal elders sang of the time when strange, sharp-boned allies had wrapped a net of light around a raging star and held back the sky. In a quiet chamber on one resettlement world, Kaelin and Mira sat with a group of Ethal children and human visitors, telling the story together. "Weren't you scared?" a human boy asked Kaelin. "When you crawled under that door on Station Kesh 7? Kaelin smiled, their glow flickering with remembered adrenaline. "Yes, I was terrified. That is what made it matter. Courage without fear is not courage, it is just habit. But when you are afraid and you move anyway because someone small is counting on you." Their gaze drifted briefly to Mira. "That is different." "And weren't you scared?" an Ethel girl asked Mira. "When you flew your ship so close to the star?" Mira thought of the Loom's frames humming around them, the way her hands had trembled over the controls, the hum of overloaded shields. "Yes," she said honestly. "Every time. But I kept thinking about standing on that station, watching Kaelin work below. They moved toward danger for me. It made it easier to move toward danger for them." The children listened, eyes wide. The night beyond the windows was filled with unfamiliar constellations, different from both human and Ethal skies of origin. The combined colony still smelled of new metal and fresh-cut plantings. Outside, the Solaris loom around Saren's star continued its slow, careful dance. The old sun would not last forever. Nothing did, but its death would not come as a sudden, implacable hammer blow on an unprepared people. It would be a long, managed dusk. Somewhere in that fading light, in the protected lanes of a system that had once seemed doomed, ships bearing both human and Ethal colors moved side by side. The debt had not been paid in full. It could never really be, not in any meaningful numeric sense. But something better had taken root, a shared understanding that an act of unthinking courage on a distant station could ripple out through time and space, into fleets and megastructures, and a defiant refusal to let a world die alone. If this story moved you, hit like, and don't forget to subscribe to Ascension of Man for more.